Hello, and welcome to Sustainability in Your Company, From Thought to Action. As you view today's webinar, please send us your thoughts and questions using the chat pod located in the lower left corner of your screen. Type your question and click the Submit button, and we will address your questions. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand approximately 48 hours after the end of today's session. You may use the same link and PIN to log in to view the recording. Please welcome our speakers, David Kiron from MIT Sloan Management Review and Holger Rubel from the Boston Consulting Group. Gentlemen, welcome. The audience is now yours.
Hi, Annette. Thank you. So I'm David, the fellow on the left side, and I'm the executive editor of MIT SMR's Big Ideas Initiative. This initiative examines large-scale trends that are influencing the practice of management in companies around the world, and today these include digital transformation, data and analytics, social business, and sustainability. I'm going to introduce Holger Rubel, who's senior partner and managing director of the Boston Consulting Group. He's based in Frankfurt, where he leads the global sustainability practice. Holger holds a PhD in physics, and I'd just like to say that any research team could do with having a physicist. We're pleased to have him on our team and here today. So now to the research and why we're all here. We're here to talk about our recent research on corporate sustainability. And for context, MIT SMR and BCG have been studying this topic together since 2009. We've just published our 5th annual report, which is titled Sustainability's Next Frontier, Walking the Talk on the Issues That Matter Most. As with the previous 4 reports, we base our findings on a survey of executives and managers from companies around the world, interviews with corporate executives and academics, and company case examples drawn from related research and interviews. In this year's report, we focus on this issue. To what extent are companies addressing the most important sustainability issues? These are issues that influence a company's long-term prospects. We believe it's important to explore this topic because there's a growing sense that companies need to make progress on sustainability issues that matter. In some circles, this idea is talked about in terms of addressing material sustainability issues. Are you a paper manufacturer in an increasingly paperless world? Do you make soft drinks or beer in an area where clean water is hard to access? What's a material sustainability threat or opportunity to a given company can be quite different across industries, geographies, or even company size. So in our survey and in the report, we talk about this idea in terms of significant sustainability, and we tried to answer 3 questions. What are the most significant social, environmental, and economic sustainability issues confronting companies? How thoroughly are businesses addressing these issues? What are companies that address the significant sustainability issues doing differently than other companies? So to begin, so this was a year-long study, and we surveyed, as you can see, 5,300 executives. And we're going to start by taking a step back, actually, and look at how companies view the importance of sustainability and the value companies are getting from their sustainability efforts.
Yes, thanks, David, and also welcome from my side to the audience. Yeah, I want to start the content part of today's presentation with one topic which is at the heart of the study we have been doing over the past years, which is basically the correlation between having a sustainability-oriented strategy and the level of competitiveness of your business. And I mean, as you see here on this chart, the good news is that almost 2/3 of the companies believe that sustainability and a strategy around sustainability really is important to be competitive. And I think the other good news is that of the other third, roughly 25%, at least believes that it will be in the future. It's not today, but will be in the future, which is also at least the good news. So a significant share of the people we have asked believe that sustainability strategy is an important topic. However, if we look onto the next slide, and here you see something that we have been investigating over the past 4 years of our study, is the question, do sustainability efforts really add profit to the business? And here the picture looks a bit more differentiated. I mean, on the left-hand side of this chart, at the dark green bars, basically there's not a big trend we can see here. So I think about 1/3 of the respondents, and this is somehow stable over the past years, say that those efforts have added profit to their business, which is a good news, of course. However, the other 2/3, also a stable number, couldn't see any large benefits, yeah? Or even worse, 11% this year even says it was just a cost position we had in our P&L, what we did about sustainability. So I think there's lots of improvement there in terms of how can sustainability add profit to the business P&L. And I think one reason for that, which is shown on the next page, and is also something that that we see. Can we have the next page, please? This one, yes. Is that if companies have a business case around sustainability, this is a core topic we have been asking about all the 5 years of the past reports. And I mean, here, if again look at the left side of the chart, the dark green, I mean, if you're positive, you can see a slight upward trend, that 1/3, probably a bit more, see that there is a business case around sustainability, which is a good news. But I think the second message, which makes me more concerning, is the 20% in the middle of the chart, those companies that have tried to develop a business case, but haven't succeeded on that. And this, I think, is a crucial topic one needs to investigate further. And in our research we did in this year's report, we really wanted to understand a bit more deeper what kind of significant sustainability issues or material sustainability issues do the companies see, and how do they tackle those, and how can those be used in order to make a business case out of that finally. And that's something that David now is going to elaborate in the next pages.
So we asked our respondents, what are the most important issues within the 3 key areas of sustainability? There are the 3 key areas that are most often associated with sustainability: the social, the environmental, and the economic. And we gave them a range of choices. And at the top, in social, you have employee health and well-being, and by a wide margin. In the environmental domain, energy efficiency was considered the most significant sustainability issue, and in the economic area, competitiveness, which was far ahead of market pressure, revenue growth, and corporate reputation and brand. In the environmental, going back, the energy efficiency was much more important than some of the longer-term issues like climate change. And employee health and well-being was much further ahead than community health and well-being, customer health and well-being, and the economic sustainability of local communities. So across these 3 dimensions, you can almost see that, well, in social and environmental, you can see that as you move further away from the company at home, their concerns with the sustainability issues become less significant. So in the next slide, we have we decided to take we wanted to look try to understand this in terms of industries. And you know, is there any industry variance in terms of what they consider to be social, environmental, and economic issues? And we believe that there were, but we wanted to understand these at a deeper level. So we're just going to look at 2 of these of the sustainability dimensions, the social and the economic, the social and the environmental. This is the social domain. And just to orient you, there's a lot going on in this slide, is that on the leftmost column, this is the average in terms of the issues that are considered, are deemed, significant. And then going across, there's a great deal of consistency that employee health and well-being is at the top. And the next thing to note is that there is a great deal of, there's a big gap between what's at the top and what comes second and third, and even going down. And if you look at if you look at the healthcare industry, for example, you can see that their responses are concentrated in just 3 areas. And the gray, which reflects responses that are that don't accumulate to more than 5%, it's just in these three areas. And most industries, about 8, have at least 10% responses in 4 subcategories. And these concentrations can be different. Another interesting feature here is the gap between is that they're in commodities and energy and utilities and healthcare. The gap is very small between what's first and what's second. But in other industries, there's actually a much larger gap, and you can see this in telco, which is on the right-hand side, and in media and entertainment, and even in consumer. You can also see this in automobiles. So there's a big gap between what comes first and what comes second in some industries, but not in others. And in some respects, this makes sense because in an industry like healthcare, where employee health is at the top, customer health is also going to be a close second because healthcare is so much concerned with the health and well-being of the customers. Turning to the environmental domain, you can see the industry lens suggests some interesting dynamics at work. Again, on the left-hand column, you have the average, and the scale goes from the gray, which is from 5% or less of respondents, to the red or black, which has the most responses that these issues are significant to their companies. That there is a very close correlation between what are the top ones and what have been, and there's sort of an industry effect. Because as you can see, just looking at energy efficiency and climate change doesn't really seem to the most frequency of responses to climate change is in energy and utilities, and that makes sense because for a number of reasons. But in healthcare, there are fewer than 5% responses in this area to climate change, and this was a bit of a surprise to us because there are so many indications that a warming planet is going to influence disease distributions. So that was a bit of a surprise in that one. There's also it was a bit of a surprise to see with in the commodities that there was a very low placement of value for climate change things, because mining, for example, creates it can have impacts, pollution impacts that influence climate change, but climate change is at the bottom there. Similarly, telco and IT also have a very low regard for product stewardship. even though the, sort of how products, sort of end use of products can generate waste. So those are sort of some of the big, interesting industry insights that we got from the social and the environmental. And we kind of we're taking about that there's some kind of a disconnect between what the industries are finding to be of significance and what what common sense is. And we wanted to understand, for the companies that are identifying these issues as important, what are they doing about them? And what we found, and this is sort of the core of our research and the key finding that we have, is that that a lot of companies, a lot of respondents were open to saying that issues in the social domain, in the environmental domain, in the economic domain are significant or very significant, but they said that, and this is represented by the red and light red bars. But on the right-hand side, the greenish columns, largely addressing and fully addressing these issues happens at a much lower rate. So there's a gap, there's a disconnect between the recognition of social issues as significant and like having the wherewithal and actually addressing these issues in impactful ways. And we see this across the social, the environmental, and the economic. This is one of the big insights that we have from this study, and we wanted to understand this disconnect in greater detail by looking at what companies are actually doing a good job addressing the issues that they themselves identify as most important, setting aside whether or not, according to some objective measure, a particular issue is like crucial. Just given what the companies themselves say are important, what are they doing about them? And for that, I'm going to turn turn it over to Holger, who's going to explain how we went about that exploration.
Yes, thanks a lot. And as David said, I mean, this understanding of the disconnect between, action and what people perceive was something we wanted to investigate a bit deeper. And if you can look on the left-hand side of the chart 11 here, so the first level of segmentation that we did was by looking at those companies that perceived, the three dimension of sustainability issues, social, economic, and environmental, to a certain level. So in each of the three dimensions, you can get 5 points. Yeah? So 15 points was the maximum, and we said, look, those companies that at least reach 11 points. This means that they have, in all three categories, a significant perception on the importance of sustainability, are those that we took into the consideration of the investigation further. So the next topic was, next segmentation, is to understand how do companies address those sustainability issues. And you see on the right-hand side in this pie chart, again, 3 types of companies. The green ones, what we call walkers. Those are companies that walk the talk. Those companies fully or largely address all of the sustainability issues along the 3 dimensions in a very, let's say, too large or significant way. It's 40% of all of those companies. Then on the other side, we have the talkers. So that's companies that talk about sustainability but don't do anything about it. So that's those companies that barely or not at all address their sustainability issues. That's 13%. It's not the majority, it's the minority, but still. And then we have another segment, which we call on the road. This is companies that, to some extent or in some dimensions, address the issues, but not in a as consequent way as walkers do, but also not in a as, let's say, ignorant way than talkers do. So this is the 3 categories we have developed. And then we looked, taking those 3 categories, on how those companies actually act along various dimensions. And this is shown on the next chart. Where again, you have the same three colors. Green is the walkers, and red is the talkers, and gray is on the road. So we looked at various dimensions, and you can see basically across all dimensions that we've been asking, there's a big significance between walkers and talkers along the way. And if I take out a few examples here. So the first thing is about sustainability strategy, and it's really remarkable that almost all, more than 90% of the walkers claim to have a sustainability strategy, whereas less than half of the talkers do. I mean, that's one very significant insight we have here. And the next two, I think, show the biggest gap between the walkers and the talkers. One is about is sustainability on the agenda of the top management, which is in 70% of the cases for the walkers, but only a quarter of the talkers do that. And I think the biggest gap we see around the business case. Yeah? So almost 70% of the walkers claim to have a business case related to sustainability, about the investments they are doing. They see a payback on that. Whereas only 20% of the talkers see a business case. This is the biggest gap among all those dimensions we have seen here. So the next two dimensions about measurement of progress, about sustainability, about social, environmental, and economic. And among all of those, you can see the big gap between the walkers and the talkers about measuring and not doing the measurements. And the third and the final point is about business model innovation. Also here we can see a significant gap between the walkers. More than half of them claim that sustainability has changed their business model. They have had a business model innovation driven by sustainability, whereas only a third, both of the walkers and of those being on the road, claim to have a business model innovation driven by sustainability. So that's quite some insights. You can really see a difference between the walkers and the talkers. That's one dimension. Then on the next slide, we also looked into the industry differences. Let me first explain what you see in the chart here. So on the horizontal axis, you see the level of how companies have addressed their significant sustainability issues, from somewhat on the left-hand side to largely on the right-hand side. If you move to the vertical axis, this is a percentage point of companies that have claimed to add profit from sustainability. And you see, if you look at the chart, there is surely a correlation between profit and action behind that. I mean, this is something we have also seen in the past surveys, but in this survey we can make it much more transparent along various dimensions. And you see here that in particular, resource-intensive industries, this is the orange one. Yeah, the strong correlation between profit on the one hand side, having an impact and business impact, and doing action on that. That's companies in the commodities industry, like mining, or energy and utilities, or industrial goods, chemicals. For those companies, they clearly see an impact if they behave in a sustainable way. Because if you can manage your resources in a smarter way, of course it has an immediate bottom line impact on your business. So it's not surprising that you have this correlation. On the other hand side, if you look more on the lower left part of this chart, more of the green companies, which is more the technology-oriented companies or service companies, we see a much lower correlation between impact and bottom line impact and action. And the media and entertainment part, which is on the very left-hand side, shows that basically if there's no profit, no impact behind perceived debt, there's also limited action companies do about that. I mean, this is, I think, also a clear indication that the importance of the business case and the impact plays in terms of how companies act around sustainability and in translating sustainability topics into action. And I think David now shows a few of the good examples, what we've seen where companies have really acted in a nice way and have translated sustainability with a good business impact.
Thank you, Holger. Yeah, we it's one thing just to do the statistics and analyze survey respondents and come up with some interesting percentages, but really you need to find actual companies if you're going to actually provide the impetus for change. And we found a few examples. I mean, there are many examples, and we've selected just a couple of them to present here. We're going to do three. One is, the first one is Domtar, which is a Canadian paper manufacturer. And their main product is uncoated free sheet paper. This is the copy machine paper for printers, envelopes, and publishing paper. And what they've been facing is a significant market change that's connected to a world that is going increasingly paperless. What do? That's a significant sustainability issue. That's precisely the kind of material sustainability issue that we want to talk about, that we have been talking about, that's both significant and is about sustainability. So they don't this company is an exemplar of a company that's walking the talk. They don't merely talk about the importance of sustainability. They've come to see their company, its strategy, its products, and even its market in sustainability terms. And what's happened is circumstances have forced Domtar to innovate. And what they've done is they've taken their expertise with trees, which is the main source of the paper, and developed new products from that are based off that expertise. They're making use of a byproduct of the paper manufacturing process, lignin, which is a biocompound in cells that essentially gives rigidity to plant walls. And you don't want lignin in free sheet paper if for no other reason than its decay contributes to that yellow-brown look you see in old newspapers. So Domtar has developed the capacity to generate like 75 tons per day of lignin. And this isn't a totally new thing for Domtar, because in the 1960s they used lignin as an adhesive in laminate countertops, but it wasn't price competitive with petrochemical alternatives. Now they're exploring commercial applications for lignin, not only in adhesives, but also in agricultural chemicals, as well as coatings and resins. And they're literally moving from being a paper manufacturer to a fiber company. They're calling themselves a sustainable, like a fiber innovator. The next example is Zipcar. And as some of you may know, Avis bought Zipcar in 2013. And Zipcar was originally conceived to fill a market demand for people who didn't want to own cars and just needed cars on an occasional basis. And it's basically a car sharing service. And we spoke with Robin Chase, who was a co-founder of Zipcar and was a CEO for a period of time before the acquisition. And she has an interesting story to tell. That she described to us some of the bullet points you see here on the left about how it works and some of the savings. And if you eliminate parking places, you can save the construction costs that go into that and the pollution that results from that. And it also eliminates the need for owned cars, which saves money. But really, when you want to know when a company is walking the talk, they'll say things like this, where they draw a very personal connection between what the company is doing and sustainability. And this is one of the things that she said to us. It turns out that the climate change models that predict the highest temperature rise and worst case scenarios in 2100 have done a much better job of predicting the historical data than any other model. These models predict that by 2100 we'll have something like 11 degrees Fahrenheit average global warming over land. The last time the planet was this warm was 20 million years ago when humans didn't exist. So, and I asked her, so is this an issue? And she said, yeah. So is this an issue? I'll say, We have 85 years before we drive ourselves out of existence. So how do you walk around with that kind of information? The best I can do is to know that I'm personally trying every day to address the situation. So I can't look back and say, I didn't try hard. I tried hard every single day. I tried hard. So that's somebody who's walking the talk, and it's actually very strong talk that she had. Now, in this third example, this example of ocean spray and Tropicana brings up another interesting finding from the research, and that is the connection between collaboration and walkers, and how collaboration turns out to be an important predictor of how companies are doing with their sustainability efforts. And in this case, Ocean Spray wound up partnering with Tropicana to use some excess capacity in railroad cars that Tropicana used. So Tropicana would send up north a train with orange juice from New Jersey to Florida, and after the boxcars were unloaded, Tropicana would have the trains come back, and they'd be empty, and they'd be basically paying the costs and sort of using that fuel for no reason other than bringing the trains back home. There was a third-party company that was working with Tropicana and Ocean Spray, and actually brokered an arrangement in which Ocean Spray used the train on its return trip, and wound up saving space and making Ocean Spray wound up cutting its transportation costs by more than 40%, and wound up cutting its own greenhouse gas emissions by 65% because it was able to use this excess capacity of Tropicana. So collaboration is an interesting dimension that Holger is going to discuss in a little bit more detail.
Right. So I think the chart doesn't look correct, at least on my screen. So I can try to explain a little bit what can be here. So what we basically ask is about, again, by the segments of the walkers, the talkers, and companies on the road, if collaboration between the companies and various customers groups have increased. So what you can't see here for some reason is that, again, if you compare the walkers with the talkers and you walk through the various customer groups on the chart, which would be, for example, government, suppliers, local communities, industry associations, contractors, you always can see that walkers have really started to increase the collaboration in a much more intense way than the talkers would do. Yeah? And if you look at the rating and what kind of groups those collaboration has increased most, it was the government, it was suppliers, but also internal business units, yeah, where the collaboration has increased in the most significant way. Whereas, of course, along competitors or contractors, this has been less the case. So this is another important message to look at. Unfortunately, you can't see it on the chart, unfortunately. But again, also here, walkers and talkers again behave in a different and in a less consequent way compared to each other. Let me take the opportunity in this audience also to highlight one, I think, very important initiative where companies can share learnings among sustainability, which is the UN Global Compact initiative, which I think is the largest global initiative around sustainability, with thousands of companies having signed on it, driven by by the top management, endorsed by the top management of the respective companies, with a very broad network about public-private companies, academia, other organizations, with regular summits where we really have high-caliber people attending and sharing their ideas. So if you also want to try that and want to get ideas, I mean, join this group and gain another insight in what's happening. And there's a special initiative which is called the LEAD Global Compact LEAD program. And this LEAD program is a smaller group of companies, about 50 companies, that have gathered together in a special initiative to drive sustainability from the board level of the company. So it's about sharing ideas and driving the topic from the highest level in the company to understand the business imperatives of sustainability, align between the board and the executive management about what are the most important, the most material issues we see, and what can be done from the governance bodies of companies in order to engage along those topics. So that's something that has been started only 2 years ago, and I think it's something which will also continue over the next years, and more and more companies probably will join on that and make sustainability an even more important part of those companies.
Great. So we have one last slide, and that's so the 5 key takeaways from this year's sustainability study. And I'll just run through these with folks, and then we'll move into the question and answer period. The first takeaway is that it seems that companies, if you go back to one of the very first slides that we had, that companies really seem to not have moved on so much from collecting the benefits, the easy benefits of there are energy efficiency gains that can help with reducing costs. Some even have made money from managing their waste differently, and it's now at this point where companies have to move to more addressing more material issues, and it's a real struggle, and that's part of the reason why we saw that companies have increased find it difficult to build a business case for sustainability. The second one is focusing on the issues that matter most is key to achieve the next level. Companies that do happen to find a way to do business model innovation, they have a strategy, they're able to build a business case, have found great success with their sustainability efforts. And part of it is, number 3, there's a substantial disconnect between thought and action on the material issues across industries, especially on issues connected with the social and environmental dimensions. Number 4, companies can close the gap and walk the talk on material sustainability issues by, again, going back, looking at what are the walkers doing. They have a sustainability strategy. They have top management support. They develop a business case. And they're also good at measuring their performance on sustainability issues. And that in itself can be very tricky and requires investments and know-how that may not exist in an organization. And that may explain why there's some interest in, at least in part, why collaboration is found so prevalently in walkers. Also, business model innovation is a key differentiator. So companies, and the last sort of key takeaway is companies don't have to go it alone, and really shouldn't, because those who are being successful with it don't seem to be relying only on themselves for making this work, for making sustainability work. So with that, we've reached the end of this part of the presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to our moderator for the question and answer. Her name is Nina Krushwitz, and she is a co-author on the report and the main sustainability editor here at Sloan Management Review. So Nina?
Thank you, David, and to Holger, too, for that presentation. So this is the Q&A portion of our program, and I'll be fielding the questions. And it looks like we have about 20 minutes left in our time together before we need to end. So I'm just going to get started. But first, there are still questions coming in, and if people would still like to submit questions but they haven't figured out how to, you can select the chat pod, which is in the lower left corner of your screen, and type in your question there, and then just click the send button, and then we will get the question over at our end. And I should also preface this by saying we're getting so many questions that I know we're not going to get to all of them. So I think we'll commit now to taking some of the questions that we don't have time to address during this webinar, and we will answer them in a couple of blog posts next year. It is next year. Next month is next year on the website, on the sustainability pages on the SMR website. Okay, so let's see. Holger, I'm going to give the first question to you. And we've had a number of people ask about the business case, and if you could define what we mean by a business case. What are some of the elements that make up a business case?
Yes, thanks for the question. And I mean, in our definition, a business case is defined by, let's say in simple words, by input versus output. So if I invest in something around, in this case, sustainability, in some efforts, can be people resources, can be material resources, capital goods investment. Is there a return, a positive return for the company? This is what we call a business case. So is in the end, at least over, let's say, a realistic time frame, do I get a benefit out of the investment I'm doing? So is it positive? Or if we say there's no business case, if I just put in investments but don't get anything out of that, then we say we don't have a business case. So this is in simple words explained how we would say, do we have a business case, yes or no?
And a follow-up to that is someone is asking whether how much, in referring to that earlier slide, it's how much of a failure to make a business case might have to do with companies using traditional accounting methods and metrics that, many of them can't really measure or detect some of the benefits that we're talking about here. Could you talk a little bit about some of the metrics that people might be thinking about?
Yes, I mean this is a very good question, and it's probably one of the most difficult questions about how to measure really success of sustainability investments. I mean, for some, there's some examples there. I take, for example, energy efficiency. If you put investments into energy efficiency, and we have seen in the presentation that energy efficiency was rated as a top category in our environmental group of questions. So for things like that, it is quite easy to measure a KPI on energy efficiency because it just can measure the energy consumption here. And the same holds true if we talk about resources in general. So if you have something on waste reduction or recycling or whatever, there's a clear impact you can measure out of that. But there might be other topics and other investments which are less directly measurable. And this is where companies really struggle in first of all, defining what a business case means at all, so how to measure that. And this is what I think, in many discussions I had, this is one of the main barriers in putting more effort into sustainability strategies in defining on how to measure those. Because if you want to correlate it in the end in the question, do I have, or am I more competitive after having done those things compared to what I've done before? You measure that in terms of market share or increased revenues. It is very hard to attribute those things just to the sustainability measures we have, because there can be many other measures that contribute to the increase in market share, for example. So I think this is one of the more difficult things. There's more, as I said, more of the more easy things like energy efficiency or waste management or other topics where you have a direct impact. And this is a reason why, if you look in our research, that resource-intensive companies are much more consequent in following up in those sustainability issues and implementing them, because for them it's much easier to measure the impact, compared to other companies that don't have this one-to-one relation between action and impact.
Thank you, Holger. We actually have a number of questions that are kind of related to definitions. David, I'm going to ask you one now, which people are wondering how we are defining sustainability and how some of our respondents might be defining sustainability.
Okay, that is a great question, and how we define sustainability for the respondents in the survey was, we meant when we use the term sustainability, we mean the ability of an organization to create economic, environmental, and social value for itself, its stakeholders, and society at large in the short term and for the long term. Now that's a different kind of definition that some people are used to. Many people are familiar with the Brundtland definition, which comes out of a sustainable development orientation to sustainability, where the unit of analysis there is the country, not the corporation. And that definition is, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. That doesn't, to us, that doesn't fit totally neatly with sort of how corporations need to be thinking about and are thinking about sustainability, because in part, what exactly constitutes a future generation? Is it a future generation of the company? Is it future generations of their customers? So we framed it in terms of the company, like an organization, and we tried to associate the concept of sustainability with value, and the three dimensions that we've been talking about here: the economic, environmental, and social.
Okay, thank you. And Holger, I think this one is for you. There's been several questions about business model innovation. What kinds of specific actions this might include, if you might have some examples of business model innovation, and also perhaps which parts of a business model companies are most often innovating around. So that's a lot of questions wrapped up in one. I'm sorry.
And it's a very broad question, of course. I mean, some of the examples, David explained earlier about companies that really have made out of a sustainability issue a new business. And there might be other examples. Everything which is about renewable energy is one of course, of the most successful examples you can see, where companies engage in renewable energy, may it be wind or may it be solar, where they try to combine, of course, the positive impacts renewable energy has in terms of our energy or CO2 balance, and making a business out of that. And if you take large companies like, I don't know, GE or Siemens, those companies even have made dedicated strategies and reports also, which they call a kind of environmental portfolio or green portfolio, where they have basically segmented their business in kind of traditional ones and those businesses that are related to product and business models. Yeah, I mean, I think both things are relevant. It's about business model and it's about products that relate to business model that have a character in order to improve a environmental balance. Can be pollution or can be energy consumption or whatever. So it's a bit tough for me to pick just some specific examples beyond those that David has mentioned, because there might be so many examples around that. And which parts of the business model? You can walk along the value chain of the companies. I mean, one is if you started at the how you collaborate with suppliers. I mean, that's something which surely is a way which companies or where, let's say, where the business model innovation starts. If I take, for example, one company that has introduced, let's say, an automotive company that has introduced a kind of environmental car, can be an e-car, electric car, and they've done it in a very consequent way, which means it's not just that the car has an electric drive in there, but they've designed the car in a way that all the components that go into it are somehow made in an environmental friendly way. And this, of course, includes also the suppliers that are an integral part of how a car is being built. And the suppliers have to qualify along certain standards in order to become a supplier of this company. Either they supply certain kinds of raw materials, or they might supply certain kind of systems and have to fulfill certain categories, like having also a certain rate of using recycling. They have to use a certain rate of renewable energy in order to produce their own products and so on. So I think the most prominent example I know is always looking backward into the supply chain of the suppliers, and the other one is looking forward into the way how you serve customers. Yeah, this is another, I think, way in order to influence the business model most. And this can be different products, can also be different services in how you serve customers with products or other services. So there's, I think, multiple ways on how to act on that. And then, of course, you have internal ways in the value chain, which is about production. And this goes to the more obvious things like reducing energy consumption or any other raw material consumption in order to become more competitive and to, of course, save money, bottom line resources, but also, of course, doing something good around environmental and other pollution topics, for example.
Okay, thank you. David, this one is for you. Could you talk a little bit about which industries are talkers and why that might be, and also what industries are walkers and why that might be?
Well, that's an interesting question. We found there's one industry that, out of all the industries that we looked at, that had a higher percentage of talkers than walkers. And most industries, and this was in part a function of how we defined walkers and talkers, but most industries had a higher percentage of walkers than talkers. The only one that had more talkers than walkers was media and entertainment. And so, and it's not just because you can associate them with talking, but one example comes to mind. We did a case study and a review of Caesars Entertainment, which is the large casino operator, which has properties throughout the United States and also in other countries as well. And they're probably more on the road, but they do reflect some of the issues that some of these large casinos have to deal with, because for one thing, they started their sustainability initiative in part around trying to enhance employee morale, because when they really started pushing sustainability as an agenda, they were in the midst of the economic crisis. People were losing their savings, and they weren't, people weren't going to the casinos to lose even more. So they started a sustainability, like where can you find cost savings, and it was staff, middle managers, and staffers would try to find. They would use vegetable oil. They would find new uses for vegetable oil, and just trying to be competitive and find new ways to do that was a big morale boost. But then when they reached the basically a second stage of their efforts, and they were looking to get a lot of energy efficiency gains, they didn't actually have a sense of sort of what the energy consumption was across. They didn't have a whole picture across the different properties they had. And to create that kind of a picture and then to actually create a metric for improving each of these proved to be a difficult task, because it turns out, air conditioning, they have properties in Las Vegas and Mississippi, and also in northern states, and some there's just going to be a greater intensity of energy use at some of these, and they couldn't think of an absolute metric to apply across all the properties, but a relativistic one also had issues, and it proved to be difficult. So that's one example within the broad industry of media and entertainment, where that's a talker. The next closest one, but even we have a ranking in the report of all the industries and where they fall in the Walker's talkers spectrum. But the next one up from media and entertainment, the next one that's close to having more talkers than walkers, is the automobile industry, and that makes sense in part because we see there are automobile manufacturers that are continuing their efforts to make hybrid cars, alternative energy cars, but there still isn't a lot of adoption of those cars. The adoption isn't as fast and pervasive as some might have hoped by this time. So that's two examples of talkers.
Okay. Thank you very much, David. I'm realizing that we're really just at the end of our hour here. So I'd just like to remind people that they can go to our website to read the full report and to download the PDF. At the back of the PDF, there is one section which lists all the questions that were asked in the survey with all the responses. So there have been many questions about the demographics of who was taking the survey. If you download that report, you'll find those answers on the back of the PDF. Thank you very much, everyone who participated, and we will try to answer some of the questions we didn't get to in a couple of blog posts next month on the MIT SMR website. Thank you very much.